6 months have passed. Officer Thomas Travis sits behind bars, awaiting trial, certain his lawyers will save him. But someone has been quietly rebuilding the case against him, stronger, sharper, undeniable. In the shadows, a new threat emerges. Someone inside the system wants the evidence destroyed before it ever reaches the courtroom. Oliver Grant is about to discover that exposing a corrupt cop was only the beginning. 6 months had passed since the arrest that shook the city. Officer Thomas Travis sat in a gray county jumpsuit inside a federal holding facility, his once imposing frame diminished by months of confinement. His lawyer, a slick defense attorney named Bradley Cole, visited weekly, always promising the same thing: "We'll beat this. The evidence has holes. Trust me." Travis clung to those words like a lifeline. He hadn't broken, he hadn't confessed. He still believed, somewhere beneath the fear, that his badge would protect him one final time. Across the city, Marcus Thorne's Southside Community Center thrived. The gymnasium echoed daily with the sounds of kids laughing, sneakers squeaking against polished floors. Marcus had become something of a local hero, his story of survival inspiring donations, volunteers, and a citywide conversation about police accountability. But Marcus wasn't the only one whose life had changed. Special Agent Sarah Jenkins had been promoted, leading the Civil Rights Division's largest task force yet. David Chen now ran his own forensic analysis unit within the Bureau. And Oliver Grant, quiet, unassuming Oliver, had returned to what he did best: watching, waiting, disappearing into rooms where powerful people made careless mistakes. The trial date was set for 3 weeks away. The evidence seemed airtight. But late one evening, in a locked federal evidence room downtown, a single hard drive containing the original convenience store footage went missing. No alarms triggered, no forced entry. Someone with access had walked in and walked out, clean as a whisper. When Jenkins called Oliver with the news, his voice remained calm, but his mind was already working. "Someone inside wants this case to disappear," he said quietly. "And if they succeed, Travis walks free, and whoever helped him will still be wearing a badge." The federal building buzzed with quiet urgency the next morning. Jenkins paced her office, arms crossed, while Chen sat at his terminal pulling every access log from the evidence room's security system. "Whoever took it knew exactly where to look," Chen said, eyes fixed on his screen. No fumbling, no hesitation. Straight to locker 114, in and out in under 90 seconds. Oliver stood at the window, hands in his pockets, watching the city below with quiet intensity. That means someone briefed them, someone who had access to the evidence manifest. "That's a short list," Jenkins said grimly. Federal agents, prosecutor's office staff, and precinct liaisons cleared for federal case coordination. "Precinct liaisons," Oliver repeated slowly. "Travis's old precinct still has a liaison assigned to this case?" Jenkins nodded. "Detective Lisa Marlowe. She's been the point of contact since the arrest, feeding us local files, coordinating logistics." "Has anyone looked closely at her?" Oliver asked. "No reason to," Jenkins admitted. "She's been cooperative. Professional. Cooperative people don't need to hide anything," Oliver said, "unless they're hiding something very well." Chen's fingers moved rapidly across his keyboard. "I can check her badge access logs against the time of the break-in." A few tense minutes passed before his screen populated with a timestamp. His face tightened. She swiped into the federal building at 11:47 p.m., logged out at 11:49. 2 minutes, exactly the window of the theft. The room went silent. "That's not proof of theft," Jenkins said carefully, though her tone betrayed her suspicion. "She could have had a legitimate reason to be there." "At midnight?" Oliver asked. 2 minutes, no stated purpose. The same night a piece of critical evidence disappears. That's not coincidence. That's carelessness. Jenkins exhaled sharply. "If Marlowe's involved, we need to know who she's protecting. Travis directly, or something bigger. A pattern of corruption running deeper than one bad cop." "There's another possibility," Oliver said. "Travis might not be the only officer at that precinct with something to hide. If Marlowe is covering for him, she might be protecting herself too." Later that afternoon, Oliver requested access to Marlowe's personnel file. On paper, she appeared unremarkable, a 15-year veteran, solid record, minor commendations. But buried in her file was something curious. 3 internal complaints filed against her over the years, each one mysteriously closed without action, each one involving allegations of excessive force during arrests in the same neighborhood Marcus Thorne called home. "She's not just covering for Travis," Oliver said, spreading the documents across the boardroom table. "She might be cut from the same cloth." Jenkins studied the files, jaw tight. If we move on her too soon, she could destroy more evidence or worse, tip off others in the department who might be involved. "Then we don't move yet," Oliver said. "We watch, we learn her patterns, and we make sure that when we do move, there's no missing evidence left to steal. Because we'll have already secured everything that matters." That evening, Oliver visited Marcus at the community center, watching from the sideline as kids ran drills under the gymnasium lights. Marcus jogged over, wiping sweat from his brow, smiling at the familiar sight of Oliver in his gray sweater. "Didn't expect to see you here," Marcus said. "Everything okay with the trial?" Oliver hesitated for a moment before answering honestly. "There's been a complication. Someone tried to make evidence disappear." Marcus's smile faded. "Travis, someone helping him," Oliver said. "We don't know how deep it goes yet." Marcus's jaw tightened, old fear flickering behind his eyes. "I thought this was over." "It's not over until he's convicted," Oliver said gently. "And I promise you, Marcus, I'm not going to let anyone erase what happened to you. Not this time. Not ever." Marcus nodded slowly, drawing strength from Oliver's steady resolve, though a quiet unease settled over him as he watched the kids continue their drills, unaware of the new danger circling closer to the life he had rebuilt. For the next 2 weeks, Oliver operated like a shadow threading through the city's institutions. He requested transfer to a temporary consulting role within the federal prosecutor's office, giving him legitimate access to case coordination meetings Detective Lisa Marlowe regularly attended. Marlowe was sharp, controlled, and careful. She spoke little, offered efficient updates, and never lingered after briefings. But Oliver noticed the small things. How her eyes flicked toward the door whenever Travis's name was mentioned. How her hands tightened almost imperceptibly around her coffee cup during discussions of the trial timeline. "She's nervous," Oliver told Jenkins after one such meeting. "Not guilty nervous. Something else. Fearful. Fearful of what?" Jenkins asked. "That's what we need to find out." Chen, meanwhile, had been quietly tracing financial records, a task that required patience and precision. Marlowe's salary was modest, standard for her rank. But 3 months before Travis's arrest, a series of deposits appeared in an account linked to her husband's construction business. Deposits totaling nearly $40,000, paid in irregular increments from a shell company with no public records. "Someone's been paying her," Chen said, presenting the findings during a late-night session in the boardroom. "Or paying someone close to her. Who owns the shell company?" Oliver asked. "That's the tricky part," Chen replied. "It traces back through 2 other shells before hitting a dead end at a registered agent in Delaware. Whoever set this up knew what they were doing." Oliver studied the financial web on the wall screen, tracing lines with his eyes. "This isn't just about protecting Travis. This looks organized. Someone with resources is managing multiple protection payments. Travis might just be one piece." Jenkins's expression darkened. "You think there's a network?" "I think it's worth finding out," Oliver said. "If Travis was one cog in a larger machine of corruption, exposing him alone won't stop the machine. It'll just replace the broken part." The following evening, Oliver made a decision that surprised even Jenkins. He requested a private, unofficial meeting with Detective Marlowe, away from cameras, away from federal oversight, in a quiet corner booth of a diner on the edge of downtown. Marlowe arrived cautious, scanning the room before sliding into the booth across from him. "You're the one who brought down Travis," she said flatly. "It wasn't a question." "I'm the one who exposed the truth," Oliver corrected gently. "Travis brought himself down. What do you want from me?" "I want to know who's paying you," Oliver said, watching her reaction carefully. "And I want to know why you took that hard drive." Marlowe's face went rigid, her hand freezing around her coffee cup. "I don't know what you're talking about, Detective," Oliver said, his voice calm but firm. I have access logs placing you in the federal evidence facility at the exact moment the footage disappeared. I have financial records showing irregular payments to your husband's company, beginning months before Travis's arrest. I'm not here to trap you. I'm here to offer you a choice most people in your position never get. Marlowe's composure cracked slightly, fear flickering beneath her hardened exterior. You don't understand what you're dealing with. Then help me understand, Oliver said, because right now all I see is a woman protecting people who don't deserve her loyalty at the cost of her own future. Marlowe was silent for a long moment, staring down at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. There's a group. Senior officers, a few precinct captains, even someone in the DA's office. They call it the fund. Officers pay in when they need protection. Internal investigations buried, evidence lost, witnesses discouraged. In return, they protect each other. And Travis was a member. Travis was small-time, Marlowe said bitterly. But small-time officers still pay dues. When he got arrested, the fund panicked. They didn't want federal prosecutors digging too deep, worried it might expose the whole network. I was ordered to remove the footage, told it was for department protection, that too many careers were at stake. Who gave the order? Oliver asked quietly. Marlowe hesitated, fear plain in her eyes. If I tell you, they'll come for me. For my family. If you don't, Oliver said, you'll spend the next decade in prison protecting people who see you as expendable. I can offer you protection, immunity, if your cooperation is substantial enough. But I need a name. Marlowe closed her eyes, exhaling shakily. When she opened them again, resolve had replaced fear. Deputy Chief Marcus Halloway, she whispered. He runs the fund, has for over a decade. The name hit Oliver like a spark against dry kindling. Deputy Chief Halloway, one of the most respected figures in the department, a man who had built his reputation on public appearances, promoting police reform and community trust. He's been hiding in plain sight, Oliver said softly, almost to himself. He's untouchable, Marlowe said. He has friends in the mayor's office, the state legislature. You take him down, you're not just fighting one corrupt cop anymore. Oliver's expression hardened with quiet determination. Then it's time someone finally did. Deputy Chief Marcus Halloway's office sat on the top floor of police headquarters, all polished mahogany and framed commendations, a wall of photographs showing him shaking hands with mayors, senators, and community leaders. He had spent 20 years crafting an image of integrity. An image Oliver now understood was nothing more than an elaborate mask. Back at the federal boardroom, Oliver laid out everything Marlowe had revealed. Jenkins listened with a controlled but simmering fury, while Chen worked feverishly to corroborate the claims with financial and communication records. If Halloway runs the fund, Jenkins said, we're not looking at isolated misconduct. We're looking at a systemic criminal enterprise operating inside law enforcement, which means we need airtight evidence before we move, Oliver said. Halloway has connections. If he senses danger, he'll bury records, silence witnesses, and disappear the whole operation before we can act. Chen's fingers flew across his keyboard. Pulling threads from encrypted communications the Bureau had already been monitoring under an unrelated investigation. I'm cross-referencing the shell company Marlowe mentioned with officers who received similar payments. So far, I've identified 6 other officers with matching irregular deposits, all traceable to the same network of shells. 6, Jenkins repeated grimly. All active duty. 4 active, 2 retired, Chen confirmed. One of the active officers works directly under Halloway as his personal aide. Oliver studied the growing web of connections on the wall screen. We need someone inside close enough to Halloway to get real-time information, someone he trusts completely. Marlowe, Jenkins said. She's terrified, Oliver said, but she's also our best chance. If she wears a wire during her next meeting with Halloway, we could get him admitting his role directly. That's an enormous risk for her, Jenkins said. If Halloway suspects anything. I know the risk, Oliver said quietly, but she made her choice to come forward. Now we need to make sure her courage isn't wasted. The following day, under tightly controlled federal supervision, Marlowe arranged a routine check-in meeting with Halloway, framed as a discussion about ongoing precinct staffing. A hidden wire, expertly concealed beneath her uniform, transmitted directly to a surveillance van parked 2 blocks away, where Oliver, Jenkins, and Chen listened in tense silence. Inside Halloway's office, Marlowe sat across from him, forcing calm into her voice. "The federal case against Travis is moving faster than expected," she said carefully. "I'm worried they might start looking beyond just him." Halloway's voice crackled through the speakers, smooth and confident. Travis was always a liability, too aggressive, too sloppy. But he understood the arrangement. He paid his dues, and in exchange, we protected him. Unfortunately, this time the situation slipped beyond our usual containment. "What happens now?" Marlowe asked. "Now," Halloway said, "we make sure nothing traces back further than Travis. You removed the footage as instructed?" "Yes," Marlowe said, her voice steady despite the tremor Oliver could sense beneath it. "Good," Halloway said. "The fund exists to protect its members, Lisa. Remember that. Loyalty is what keeps all of us safe. Betrayal." He paused meaningfully. "Betrayal has consequences none of us want to discuss." In the van, Jenkins exchanged a sharp glance with Oliver. The admission was clear, direct, damning. "We have him," Jenkins whispered. "Direct acknowledgement of evidence tampering, an admitted protection scheme, implied threats against a subordinate." But before the conversation could continue further, a sudden commotion erupted on the audio feed. Raised voices, a chair scraping violently across the floor. "Wait." Halloway's voice turned sharp with suspicion. "Take off your jacket." "What? Why?" Marlowe's voice cracked with sudden panic. "Take it off now." Oliver's stomach dropped. "He's onto her." Jenkins was already moving, yanking open the van door. "We move in now." Agents poured from unmarked vehicles positioned discreetly around the building, racing toward the entrance. Inside Halloway's office, the confrontation had turned physical. Halloway grabbing Marlowe's arm roughly, ripping at her jacket collar in search of the wire. The door burst open. Federal agents flooded the room, weapons raised, voices commanding Halloway to release her immediately. Startled, Halloway staggered back, disbelief washing over his composed features as he registered the badges, the weapons, the absolute end of everything he had built. Marlowe collapsed against the wall, shaking but unharmed, relief and terror mixing violently across her face. "Deputy Chief Marcus Halloway," Jenkins announced, storming into the room with commanding authority, "you are under arrest for racketeering, obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, and conspiracy." Halloway's face contorted with disbelief and fury. "This is insane. Do you know who I am? I've dedicated my life to this department. You dedicated your life to corrupting it," Oliver said, stepping into the doorway, his calm voice cutting through the chaos. Halloway's eyes locked onto him, recognition dawning with horrified clarity. "You," he snarled. "You're the one who's been circling this from the start. I told you once before," Oliver said quietly, "that true power isn't fear. You built an empire on threats and payoffs, believing loyalty could be bought and silence enforced forever. But every empire built on corruption eventually collapses under its own weight." Federal agents moved in, cuffing Halloway's wrists behind his back despite his furious protests. As they marched him from his own office, past photographs of handshakes and false accolades now stripped of meaning, the full scope of the fund's corruption began unraveling in real time. 6 additional officers named, financial trails exposed, years of buried complaints finally brought to light. Marlowe, shaking but resolute, was escorted out separately, her cooperation ensuring leniency in the sweeping indictments that would follow. As she passed Oliver in the hallway, she paused. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving me the chance to make it right." "You did the hard part," Oliver said gently, choosing courage over fear. "That's never easy." By nightfall, the story dominated every news channel in the state. Not just the arrest of one corrupt officer, but the exposure of an entire hidden network operating within the highest levels of the police department. The scale of corruption stunned the city, sparking immediate calls for sweeping departmental reform. The trial of Officer Thomas Travis never happened in isolation. It became the opening chapter of the largest police corruption case the city had seen in decades. Deputy Chief Halloway's arrest triggered a cascading investigation that exposed the fund's full network. 6 additional officers indicted, 2 retired officials charged with obstruction, and a former assistant district attorney implicated in burying internal complaints for over a decade. Detective Lisa Marlowe, in exchange for her cooperation, received a reduced sentence and immunity from the most serious charges. Though her career in law enforcement ended, she found an unexpected second calling working as a consultant for a police reform non-profit, helping design better internal oversight systems. Determined to prevent another fund from ever taking root, Travis's trial concluded 3 months later. Faced with overwhelming evidence, video footage, recorded threats, and now testimony linking his actions to a broader culture of protected corruption, he accepted a plea deal rather than risk trial. 15 years with eligibility for parole after 10, contingent on continued cooperation with federal investigators as they built cases against the remaining fund members. Halloway, defiant to the end, was convicted on all counts after a highly publicized trial. His sentencing hearing drew crowds outside the courthouse, community members holding signs demanding accountability, many of them former patients, families, and organizers. Marcus Thorne himself had rallied through the community center's growing advocacy network. Marcus stood among them the day of the sentencing, no longer just a survivor of injustice, but a recognized voice for reform across the city. He had testified before the city council twice that year, sharing his story to support new legislation mandating independent oversight boards for police accountability, legislation that passed with overwhelming public support. Months later, on a warm spring evening, Oliver Grant found himself back at the Southside Community Center, watching from the doorway as Marcus led a new mentorship program for teenagers interested in community organizing and civic leadership. "You've built something remarkable here," Oliver said as Marcus approached, coffee in hand as always. "We built it together," Marcus said, smiling. "None of this happens without you sitting quietly in that corner chair, watching, waiting." Oliver chuckled softly, an unusually warm sound. "I just made sure the truth had a chance to be heard. The department's launching an independent review board next month," Marcus said. "Real oversight, real accountability. Something that might have stopped Travis and Halloway before it ever got this far." "Progress isn't perfect," Oliver said, watching the teenagers practicing public speaking exercises across the gym. "But it's real, and it's earned." Marcus studied his quiet friend for a long moment. "You could take credit for all of this, you know. The reforms, the arrests, the changes happening across the whole department. Most people would want recognition." Oliver shook his head gently. "Recognition isn't the point, Marcus. The point is that a father can bring his kid to this center without fear. That officers who abuse their power know accountability is finally real, not just a promise on paper. That people like you have the courage to keep fighting, even after everything you endured." Marcus extended his hand, and Oliver shook it firmly. "Whatever storm comes next," Marcus said, "the city's lucky someone like you is watching for it." Oliver offered a small, knowing smile as he turned to leave, blending once more into the ordinary rhythm of the city outside, an unremarkable man in a gray sweater, carrying within him the quiet, unwavering conviction that truth, given enough patience and courage, always finds its way into the light.